Yes, she's back. It's Michelle. And when I come to the podium, I love interaction. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh my goodness, some of you didn't get the memo. Let's try it again. Good afternoon, everyone. I know the food is good, but it's not so good that you're that tired. We'll do it one more time. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for responding. I tell you, it has been such a wonderful conference for me. I know I just started at NSF in September. And for those of you who just got here today, my name is Michelle Claville. I'm a program officer. My assignments are with HBCU Up and Ellis Amp. But it is my pleasure to thank all of you, those of you who didn't get the welcome all of you to the 2020 PI meeting for HBCU Up in CREST. And now that we are in the culminating event, I want to also thank all of you for your participation in all of the different events that we've had thus far. My job here today is to introduce our guest speaker. You'll see from your program that our speaker is Dr. Brian Chad Starks. His bio is in your program, and I'll refer to the write-up to mention some of the highlights, but I just wanted to tell you some things that aren't there. I met Brian last summer, I believe. I was invited by a group out at Woods Hole that the group was looking at increasing the diverse representation in their programs and basically what could be done to make sure that we had more students of color engaged in those programs. And he was a keynote speaker. We traveled on, my first time on a Peter Pan bus. And so when we got off at the same spot and our host came to pick us up, we realized, oh my gosh, we're going to the same meeting. We struck up a conversation, of course, and then, I just watched and saw how he conducted himself, and I realized he was dealing with personal business on the phone, he was dealing with professional business at the same time, and then he was quite cordial as we spoke, but very down to earth. I'm still trying to figure out what kind of person this is that I will listen to at some time in the meeting. And what you'll find when you hear him is that he is a very down-to-earth person that is very passionate about what he does. I asked him last night, out of everything that's here, what are the things that you would like the audience to know, to especially know about you? He said, tell him I'm a product of public schools. I said, yes, sir. I said, what else do you want them to know? He said that basically, because of his journey, because of all that he has gone through, he has overcome a great deal of issues that marginalize people who are black and brown. And so when you hear from him, you will hear his insight from his personal experience that he's poured into his lifelong work. His work is very evident, and he's called upon in different places to engage and to talk about engaging people in STEM, and not just in STEM, but just giving people a chance that you probably would not have thought of as you engage in your scientific pursuits. So, without further ado, I'm going to welcome, I'm going to dare say my friend. We've only met twice. You thought I'd known this man forever, huh? I'm going to welcome my friend, Dr. Brian Chad Starks, to the podium, and I would hope that you would join me in making him feel at home with us. Would you do that? Come on, Brian.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Let me start off by expressing my gratitude to Michelle. We did meet last year, and whenever you go into these STEM spaces as a social scientist, you've already separated yourself before you even open your mouth. But I've been fortunate enough where I've been afforded the opportunity to do what I call as my purpose. And when I got to Woods Hole last year, I saw all these beautiful, intelligent folks that just needed a different lens of understanding what real social justice and what diversity work looks like. So I feel that my work is more of a responsibility, and I position myself to have two forms of education, which I think influences the way we see the world through a perceptual lens. I value informal education as much as I value formal education. So when I got a chance to speak in front of Michelle last year and the graduate students and other STEM faculty, I always promised them, like I'm gonna promise you, is that I'm gonna have a genuine and authentic conversation with you today. I am a storyteller. I will not apologize for what this country has done for the last 400 years. I will not own and internalize emotionally the issues that continue to perpetuate communities where most black and brown folks come from in this country. I do have the responsibility to have that combination of informal and formal education. I attended predominantly white schools as an undergraduate at Wofford College on a football scholarship. I am a former athlete. I have a bachelor's degree from there in sociology. I have a master's degree in criminal justice and a master's certificate in alcohol and drug studies from the University of South Carolina. I am a former bail bondsman. I used to get people out of jail for a living. She mentioned that I was a proud public school graduate. I am a fixer. I am the youngest of 5. I grew up with a number of these social barriers that we claim in the social scientists are structural inequality. I moved maybe 7 times in the 17 years before I graduated, and the first stability that I was afforded is when I turned my key on campus at Wofford College in 1990. I am exactly the conversation that brings us to this room right now to further our purpose and our mission, not only in the discipline of STEM, but the social contract that we've all have signed into to make us a much more humane society and do this thing that we call love the right way. So as I began to open my mouth last year in front of these graduate students and these STEM folks, I realized that this conversation needs to be much larger. At the University of Delaware, working on a PhD in criminology, I am a critical criminologist, which means that I examine theoretical explanations why certain people participate in crime, but I also look at the way we respond to crime. From a systemic perspective, how do we respond to the word crime based on the barriers that have intentionally been placed in this society? You can't tell me with all the intellectual acumen, all the access to resources that we have, that we can't fix poverty, that we can't fix racism, that we can't fix ableism, sexism, all the isms that we know exist. So I promise you to have a genuine, authentic conversation, right? The system isn't broken. It's working as designed. We have always used people as commodities in this country. I learned as a bail bondsman, coming from these environments, taking care of my friends and families, and as you can hear the degrees, sociology, criminal justice, alcohol and drug studies, I am a fixer. I needed to fix where I was from before I thought anybody else would listen. I wanted to use my informal education and match it. Because understand, black and brown communities, it is not that easy to walk on other campuses and immerse yourself into a space that didn't invite you. You don't want to lose the relationships that have defined you your entire life. No one else can tell you, because of the negative identities that society has placed on some of these structural barriers like alcoholism, that you still don't love that person. You don't walk away because you get a bachelor's degree in sociology from Wofford College in South Carolina. Nah, you lift as you climb. You turn around and you go back. Because understanding that this access to information creates the structure and inequality, it's more about resources. So if I was fortunate enough to be the one chosen, and I do say chosen, to go out and gather the information, then I owe them. I owe the opportunity to go back and stand in front of them and take the tomatoes that's going to be thrown, being called college boy, understanding that the trauma that they've experienced, all they're doing is passing it on to me. But I learned the rules of the game. I'm awarded that pain. I am a sponge. I can soak up that knowledge, and I can walk out in different spaces and communities and say, this is exactly what I mean when we continue to perpetuate oppression on certain populations. People are hurt. People are afraid. And we're coming from communities that continue to re-traumatize the same black and brown folks. So walking on a college campus to go play football at a predominantly white institution in South Carolina, I thought that was easier than the first 17 years. So you tell me I get to do a sport that I love, and I get to learn, read books that you 300-400 years did not access to people that look like me. And there were people from different denominations, racial, ethnic, and gender, that died by trying to teach others to read at candlelight. Oh, you bet sign Brian Chad Starks up for it. I'm going to sit in the front of the class. So on this journey, I realized, when I got into this research portal and these conversations, that, wait a minute, these sociologists are talking about my family. They're talking about my neighborhood. Finally, for the first time in an inclusive conversation, I saw myself in a book. I think I'll say that again, right? Finally, for the first time from an inclusive lens, I saw myself in a book. That's when it started clicking. Who's writing this narrative? Because these things, these terms about a dysfunctional family, whoa, that's new to me. As my brother used to say all the time, we didn't know we was poor until somebody else told us. That's love. That's where you can take these things now that we call derogatory identities and these words that people are using that's become very pejorative. My ancestral history has taught me to turn those things on its head. I moved from an assets-based approach. That's a different lens than most people are going to look through. I do not have the right to ignore the educational experiences that I've been afforded, let alone to the history of those that died for me to be here. Folks, what we're talking about now, we have progressed some, but we do not have the majority of the people that are advocating and talking about social justice, that are removing the barriers. The structural violence isn't the same. My fear is that we've taken a Western identity and we're prioritizing things like property over humanity. Here's what I mean. If we wait to have these conversations once we start working in universities and colleges, then we're wrong. We have mortgages. Some of us partners, we have parents, daughters, sons, children, which means that a college fund, the neighborhood I live in, the car I drive, my social status, those are variables that are all included for us to now be conscious to do the right thing. Let's back step a little bit and let's take a sand pile. Let's take a kid's toy box, and there's two kids playing, and Brian says something rude to Michelle. Every adult around there will come and say, Brian, don't say that. Be nice to Michelle. That hurt her feelings. As Michelle begins to cry, I feel bad as Brian, then I begin to cry, and I own the fact that I hurt Michelle. So now I'm asked to apologize, Michelle, in hopes that she forgives me. It's amazing at the age of 2, we have this high moral superiority in society. Why do we lose it as adults? We are witnessing discrimination and oppression on our jobs, in our churches, in our communities, in our families. But it's so much easier for now to walk away from what we know is right. My scientists, we have a number of people that are employed in positions that aren't doing the right thing. Just imagine if we did the right thing, what this would look like. In my firm, we use 4 constructs of social justice called identity, culture, diversity, and respect. As a PhD student at the University of Delaware, I met this gentleman who was one of the top physicists in the country, my understanding. We played basketball together. I played with these brothers. Well, it was 2 white dudes that were biologically related, so they were brothers, right? We began a friendship on and off the court, and they said, we want you to meet our father. So once I met their father, he and I started exchanging research interests, and he exposed me to different cultural experiences by the simple way of taking me to different restaurants for lunch. Understanding the PhD program, a doctoral student, I didn't have the money, and he paid for these 1.5-hour sessions where I was able to absorb resources that I never could have gotten access to. If you've never been over there, you don't know anyone from over there, how in the world are you supposed to know what over there is? We put up barriers, and I mean communities, for 10-year-old kids, and we ask them to figure out how to overcome them before they get to school to make our teachers feel comfortable, and we haven't figured it out as adults. Let's take a step back and have a real conversation about what we expect from each other. So these cultural experiences, of course, they don't feel good, but they do empower, right? Because I feel bereft of something that I thought I should have deserved just as a child. And I'm watching these relationships with him and his sons, and I'm envious. Well, at the same time, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity, and I'm going to come home and I'm going to do what? And I'm going to share it. And I'm going to challenge us, and I'm going to be the one that's going to get told, boy, shut up. We don't want to hear that. Hey, folks, if this work was easy, I wouldn't be standing up here in front of you with a PhD in criminology. It takes a great deal of courage, and we cannot allow fear be the reason why we don't. I get it. I get it. But the affinity bias that we all have as PhDs, I think it positions us well to be able to step up and do a little bit more from the responsibility that we have as people, not only just scientists. So identity, how do you see yourself when you look in the mirror? Most of us, this thing here called the watch, it dictates our lives, right? We're moving in society on a clock. How many of you have stopped to actually self-reflect and realize what makes you happy? How many of you have stopped to realize what makes you sad? How many times have you thought about what makes you uncomfortable and the why? In doing this work, you have to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. Why do saggy pants bother you when those young black and brown men walk into your classroom? I bet most of you have not even thought about the why. You just attach yourself to a number of these institutions that are flooding the negative stereotypes about different communities. We watch the news. The first 4 minutes of every 30-minute news segment, tell me what you see. You see the worst situations in a community. They wait till the end to put a smile on your face. The system isn't broken. It is working as designed. They are pushing fear out into the world so that we can keep being segregated and separated. Our intellectual acumen is too high to let those institutions of historical discrimination and oppression dictate how we love each other. I'm going to say it. I'm too smart for that. And I know I'm in the room with like-minded people. Your identity, self-reflection. How do you see yourself when you look in the mirror? You need to love everything that you see in that mirror, especially the things you don't like. You need your kids, your students to understand that it is not their fault that the first prison was built by the Quakers in 1784 in the state of Pennsylvania. Stop making these babies responsible for what this country has been doing over and over and over. Inform them of the reality of we got to help you navigate these spaces. I mentioned the degrees. Guess how many degrees I got when I get pulled over by a law enforcement officer? Here's where that informal education came from. That lady that was picking cotton called my mama. Chad Starks, I need you home. We need babies to come home. We don't need to be smart. We need to be clear. So yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Looking 2 hands here because I need to get home. I'm the proud father of a young black daughter who is a guidance counselor in Summerville, South Carolina. I had to be the first man she fell in love with, and I had to be the first man to break her heart. I had to tell her the truth about what society may see her as. The way she dresses, the way she speaks, the way she navigates, her decisions about relationships. That didn't feel good as a father, but I'd be doggone if I sent her into a world that I know it's not going to be accepting to her to be comfortable. Scholars, I need us to prepare our babies for the real world. We got to have genuine and authentic conversations. And you've got to be comfortable with your identity to earn their trust. These pronouns have to change if you're going to do social justice work. It's not about I, it's about them. And our responsibility as educators is to teach them, not just to teach. It is for them to learn. If our curriculums aren't diverse and using cultural competency, I'm asking you, please go back to the drawing board. You got to invite them in. If you aren't asking your students and reminding them about your office hours, I need you to do that. See, because you wasn't in my neighborhood. I ain't seen no PhDs. Wasn't nobody telling me I was smart. That lady was surviving. She was working to put food on the table. You know, that first lower level on the triangle of success in life with basic needs, that's what we get. You're not dreaming big. I wasn't dreaming with my eyes open. All those cliche things, they sound good. There's some communities where each and every day you're just trying to eat, and that becomes the priority. We create messengers of social justice in my firm. And if it wasn't for Elisa Ash, my 3rd grade teacher, I'm not exactly sure where I would be. She sent home the papers to have Brian Chad Starks tested for the Gifted and Talented program. She said, boy, what you doing in my class? Ma'am, you too smart. My district had 1 school that was for the Gifted and Talented program. Came back 2 weeks later, she said, did you get the papers? Did your parents sign the papers? Here's some cultural competency. Guess what? Was raised not to lie, right? So now I'm stuck. But I was also raised that you don't take home to school. Sorry, guidance counselors. That's cultural competency. It is not comfortable for you to tell the idiosyncrasies and the struggles to a stranger. So of course I didn't want to disrespect or disappoint mama, right? Some of your babies don't want to disappoint where they from. It is not that easy to walk in your office during office hours and introduce themselves. They need a little buffer. Miss Ash was my buffer. She saw on my face that I was not telling the entire truth when I said, no ma'am, I forgot to give it to him. So I'm going to take the responsibility and not put it on the parents, my mother. I don't know what she did. I don't know if she signed the papers for the name. But that next year, I got bussed. My homeboys, we get on the bus. We go to the same school in the neighborhood. They say, hey, Chad, you ain't coming to school today? I said, man, y'all know I got to go to the other school. I didn't know that was busting until I became a sociology major. Why do I use both names? My mother put Brian on my everything that was legal for school, but in the neighborhood and in sports, I was Chad. I am authentically, holistically, both of those people. I do not separate them. I don't have to. Society asks me to choose this. Society wants to put me in a box and in a category. There is no box. I'm a critical criminologist standing in front of NSF-supported STEM conference. Don't put your babies in a box. Help them to dream with their eyes open. Tell them about their ancestry, history, and how great they come from those bloodlines. You're the one where your voice matters. It matters, and I need you to get equipped with loving you and understanding what your confirmation bias and your identity, your group identity means to them. Saying PhD means a lot. When I got introduced to Space Grant, NASA program that I worked with at Delaware, I was informed that they were facing probation because they didn't have this type of face with this pigmentation, and they couldn't get students of black and brown students to apply for scholarships, internships, and graduate fellowships. I said, wait a minute, hold, time out. I'm going home trying to get the homeboys to stop selling crack. I was 14 when the war on drugs hit. And every time I open my mouth, they say, well, college boy, what's your alternatives? What else you got? Nothing. I said, you realize what you're giving me right now? Now I got an answer to this question. I got undergraduate scholarships. I got research internships. Y'all know what those 4 letters mean if you go to certain neighborhoods? I get attention now, not as criminologists, right? I get attention when I say NASA. I need you all to use those tools that you have to turn lights on in their hearts. I need you to use those tools that you have to get them confused and uncomfortable because it's going against the love that their parents told them. What do I mean by that? What your grandmama tell you about a person that looks like me? I know what my mother told me about difference. Family is the first institution that fails us when it comes to diversity, and they do it out of love because of what the history of this country has been like. My mother didn't want me to get whatever, right? She wanted me to put my head down. She wanted me to be docile. It worked. Remove the man, remove the father, the female. Now, you're going to be the one that raised the sons. It got to a point where she looked at me and she said, boy, you'll say anything in front of white people. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. And of course, there's going to be that friction and that challenge. But it was my messengers along the way. It was my coaches that told me, son, there's 2 doors. And they both have love written over the top. One of them has chains, bolts, locks, and you don't have the key. But there's another door with love written over the top with nothing but sunshine and inviting you in. When are you going to choose that door with love written over the top, with the sun rays and the sunshine that's inviting you in? It's always a struggle if I've done enough to take care of where I come from. Your students aren't going to leave their communities because they get PhDs. Your work in the STEM field for social justice must understand the cultural competent part of it. They want to fix the problems. It's not just about water to them. It's about the health conditions that have been coming over the last years in their communities that have made their grandmother sick. And I need you as scientists to understand that we can connect these issues and do interdisciplinary, which is the real definition of what diversity is about. You all have not been trained in historical institutional discrimination and racism and culture. Guess who has? So when NASA came to me as a social scientist, I said, you realize this is my lab outside. I don't get to control it, and whew, I think I got enough data. So when I presented my idea that I could help NASA Space Grant to the physicists, I said, I bet you advertise these applications and awards with a flyer in the hallway. Chad, how do you know that? I said, bruh, that's how Westerners think. I said, but let me tell you something about black and brown students that's coming to school. They ain't looking for no NASA flyer on the wall for them to say, yep, there me go. How many times are those flyers even inclusive based on equity? How many times are they not just white men? That one nugget that I dropped them, he's like, oh. He was like, okay, now I need you to come meet with our director. He's from the old country, didn't know what the old country was. And he says he's probably never sat down with a black guy before. Your babies need to know the value of being the first. We use these derogatory terms as first generation as if they're bereft of intellectual acumen that can contribute to the field of STEM. Stop it. Tell them about being trailblazers. Go back and look at the historical conversations of who was the first. I wouldn't be here if there wasn't a first person that loved me differently and were willing to risk it. Don't you let them have first generation as a negative on their resumes. You say, look at what you overcame. Oh, I wish I had the courage that you had to be the first. Do an assets-based approach when you have them. And you applaud them for taking the courage, knowing the community where they came from is not always applauding it. See, because when they go to that school, they want that degree to hang on the wall. They're not thinking about them being scientists, evolutionary biologists. They've never been over there. They don't know what's over there. How can they think about that? Where they seen the terms evolutionary biologists? Stop, y'all. Stop. The expectations that we have are unrealistic. We have got to be honest. I'm a social scientist, and I owe the field the real lab in society. I diagnose social ills just like a medical doctor diagnoses health issues. I cannot lie about what society is doing. I need you. I need you knowing your identity individually. I need you knowing your identity from a group perspective. That includes race, gender, sexual orientation, excuse me, and of course the PhD. And I need you to use it. And I need you to use it for good. When I have these conversations and we talk about privilege, people are already sensitive about it. You don't think there's a privilege for people writing down what you say? Come on, faculty members. People clap for you when you present your research. That's a privilege to be able to get the way of thinking into other spirits and minds. Share that. Own that you are privileged in this way. Own that society has afforded you different opportunities, but you want to use your powers for good. You're very comfortable with understanding that there's been intentional oppression, but what can we do about it? Secondly, culture. Let them babies have their culture, y'all. They're going to listen to their music. They're going to eat their food. They're going to dress the way they want. It's an opportunity for you to learn something. But please, when I go into the Walmart, which is not too often, do you think anybody knows I got a PhD and I got 22 years of formal education and I get to come to D.C. to stand here in front of some of the best scientists in the world to have this conversation? I'm sorry, that is not my life. That's not your student's life. I get treated with a number of those stereotypes that those misinformed institutions like the media are educating people. We're educated. We know better. We have the responsibility, and we got the population walking in our classroom every day. We don't have to go look for them. Let them have their culture. Secondly, understand the culture of your institution where you're working, right? What I'm saying is, I don't want you to lose your job, and then you're going to be in my criminological study in the next 20 years. But if you understand the rules of the game, then we can help what? We can navigate the game. You can't do it on the sideline. You can't do it, as I tell my students, if you're going to complain about something, learn it before you start complaining. And an opportunity is there for it to be fixed. Think about your campus environment. Is it inclusive? Are you meeting folks where they are? Are you doing real equity work? Are you enunciating these students' names and not using microaggression and your PhD to say your mama should have changed your name to something else? Stop trying to tell them people how to name their babies. Stop it. That's them people babies. Be honest with yourself. If you cannot pronounce the name, just say it. How would you like your name pronounced? You aren't going to lose anything. You're going to gain because, wow, you really care? Yes, we're educators. We come from caring. Diversity, different ways of thinking, different ways of being, different ways of knowing. That's it. Can we get past checking this box of race, class, and gender? I'm over it. We're way too smart to keep talking about race. Guess what I love about STEM folks, though? If the rocket doesn't go where you designed it to go, what do y'all do? You go back in the lab. Criminologists, guess what we do? No disrespect, NSF. But what do we do in criminology and the social sciences if we don't get it right? We write it up in the journal and talk about the idiosyncrasies, and it still gets published. We are one of the few fields that are continuing using theories that we know don't work. Oh, I've told you, I haven't turned my whole social science criminology card in, but I'm close to being a STEM scientist. We got something in common. What you love, you want to fix, you care about it, you're going to handle it carefully. Please put my babies in that conversation. Please handle them carefully. Last one, respect. If I had my Venn diagram up, it's an overlap. Identity, culture, diversity, and respect. And as simple as the definition goes, if you start at the end with respect, that means the other three we fixed. If you start at respect with the end, to be able to respect different identities, being able to respect and value different cultures, being able to appreciate and value diversity, then respect is all we need. No matter how good or how bad I am, I probably won't go to Sunday dinner with all of you. One of my mentors, Dr. Elijah Anderson, wrote a book called The Cosmopolitan Canopy. And it's about a space in Philadelphia where the isms don't exist. Regardless of your racial, ethnic, gender, sexual orientation, age, everybody in this space helps each other, right? I go to a lot of places and have these conversations, and everybody is all in love with each other while we're sharing this space. I need to challenge you, and I need you, and I need you, and I'm coming on bended knee. I need you to take these conversations back home over your dinner table. I need you to have these conversations with your family members, with your friends, and I need you to challenge them. One of my good friends, a white male dentist in South Carolina, now has a new pediatrician, a new church, and they sold a lake house. See, a lot of us love to say that we don't have these isms because we've never been in a position to show it. Can't say you don't have racism if you ain't been around nobody with a different racial identity, folks. Stop letting yourselves off the hook. But I need you to talk about ableism and sexism over the dinner table to combat the institutions that we know are misinforming us. It's us, and your babies need to have these conversations now. I will repeat, we create messengers of social justice. I need you all to join me in eradicating the issues so we can get down to the real science, produce the best scientists in the world. Now let's put this nation where it should be. Thank you all for allowing me to come and share. I really appreciate the opportunity. I hope you have taken something from this conversation. And please do me a favor. Join me as messengers of social justice. Thank you.
We have some time for some questions, Brian, you good for some questions? I
I'm
know
great.
you're ready. I know, he's been telling me that since yesterday. I'm ready. Are there any questions from the floor? There's a mic there and there's one here. I invite you to ask your questions. Please go to the mics.
First of all, I want to thank you for that presentation. It was a
Thank you, brother.
very unique perspective, and I appreciate it. My question is, I'm Carl Jackson from Virginia Union University, here as an awardee of the Research Initiation Award for HBCU Up. But my question is, it's important, I know that it's important for our black youth to know the history and the intentional structural barriers that exist, but where do we draw the line at making it so overly negative that they start to build this hate, and it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy? When I go into this environment, they're not going to like me, I'm not going to like them. So you have to, what would you speak to as far as being measured and how much we talk about the hatred towards us, as to not have them exhibit that hate when they go into these new spaces, if that makes sense.
Great question, great comment. And I get that comment a number of times from some of my friends, right? And it's really about making your children jaded, right? And my response to them and my response to you is, in this job, you got to put on a number of different hats. And the counseling hat is what you're going to have to put on when you start talking about sharing this information. I don't believe that the honest conversations create hate. It creates hurt. And I think that's where we got to focus on that emotion and have them understanding that it wasn't their fault. It isn't about just the conversation, it's how you present it to them. They're already angry. I think this is what helps subside the anger from a cathartic perspective, is that way. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Camille McHale, University of the Virgin Islands, and thank you for sharing today. So you have us here. We're all trying to get students into our offices. Mm-hmm. And you said it's really hard for students, and we understand that. So I'm just asking you, could you share some of the, how do we break down that wall? You said it so much better than I am now, but you said, how do we show the love so that they come in to our offices? How do we get them there in the first place to see that we don't bite or that they are part of the community?
Do you know them?
Yes, I was actually asking a general question. My office
Well, I'm asking
always,
of you,
yeah.
right? Like, that's it, right? Like, in
Yeah.
these small spaces, like most HBCUs and MSIs and tribal institutions, that's the advantage of having that small classroom. Take that curriculum one day, throw it away. Sit and have a conversation with them and ask them who they are. Now, in doing that, self-disclosure is the best method to build trust. Let them into you instead of continuing to separate. For example, I don't like these things. Why? Look, I just put a barrier between me and you. There are no barriers. I want you to see that I'm tangible, I'm this person, I come from this place, just like you. But in higher education, we are taught to separate ourselves and believe that we are smarter than everybody else. And that's the confirmation bias that I struggle with. And we don't need for our students to affirm our intelligence. And I think that's happened sometimes, which continues the barrier that we all are trying to break down. One more. I wrote my teaching pedagogy when I was a doctoral student, and I put in my pedagogy that I'm so excited to learn from my students. I had a white female mentor, and she says, "Brian, take that out." And I said, "Take what out?" She says, "About learning from your students." She says, when you get a PhD, a university wants to think that you know everything. And I said, but I don't know everything. And she couldn't understand where I was coming from, but she gave me so much knowledge about the culture of higher education. Do you think I took that out of my pedagogy? Why not? Because I wanted to go to a culture, a climate of an institution that was supporting faculty members learning from their students. They could teach you so much about who they are, which you take back into your lab, and you create exercises in your curriculum. You may do a holiday, you may not do a holiday, you may make some fun games. You bring it out of them, and they will tell you what they want from you.
So just as a follow-up, so one of the things that I did, so I'm provost at the University of Virgin Islands, so I get to address the faculty at the beginning of every year. And this year, my challenge, I always try to come up with a challenge, and my challenge to faculty was to every week outside of the classroom have 3 meaningful conversations with a student anywhere.
Yes.
And it was because I think it's so important that they see us as people and not just in front of the classroom, and that they do come to your office, or you do, if they're not coming to your office, then you can go to them
Exactly.
as well. So.
And I believe the video that we saw, some person said that, right? Like they need to see you as being real. How many of you all have a comedy in your toolbox? You know,
We have corny math jokes, does that count?
say them. Like, be comfortable being corny in front of them. It will remove a barrier because you are going to be your authentic self. Do not disrespect these kids by acting like. That's when you lose them. But if you're okay being corny, say it. They want you to be authentic. They want to know what's real. That's not a negative. You're going to gain trust by being authentic.
Excellent talk. My name is Vernon Ruffin from Virginia Union University. And I had a 2-part question. Just wanted to know your thoughts on these things. I liked when you said that I'm smarter than that. You acknowledge the fact that you have the ability. Mm-hmm. How do you have students acknowledge their ability if at a young age there's really not a way to measure their ability? And also, I like the fact that you also did athletics. And so I was having a conversation with another professional about how parents, although they celebrate academic accomplishments, they're much more robust when they celebrate athletic accomplishments. How do you change that paradigm?
Good question. All right, for the first one, don't go yet. The first one was about making them aware that they're smart.
Right.
Have you ever seen The Wire?
I don't really watch TV, but I know what you're talking about.
So The Wire, some say, is probably the best documentary ever created to tell you the state of America. And as a social scientist, I agree with it. But Michael B. Jordan plays a part where he is taking care of his younger siblings because his mother and father are both heroin addicts. And they're living in the city of Baltimore. Okay. And Michael B. Jordan is teaching, he's doing the homework with his little brother. And his train A leaves the depot at this time, travels this many miles at this speed, train B leaves. What's the answer? Goes over and over and over and over and over, and he cannot explain it. His little brother cannot get it. So Michael B. Jordan looks at him, he says, if you got 5 spider bags and 3 blue tops, and you sell them all for 20% less, but the re-up man coming through in 10 minutes, how much money you got? He said $30.
Right, I get it.
Cultural competency, right? Sometimes we got to put it in their language. And he went right back and applied that. That's the intelligence. Appreciate their informal education and connect with them and tell them, bro, you smart. Now let's take that same way of thinking. Now let's read this chapter about heliophysics.
I feel like we may do that on an undergraduate level, but it more so as an elementary issue. Those teachers that we have, raising them when they define themselves.
I just left Delaware training my school teachers. I love them. We need some help. And just to be fair to them, no one is giving them a culturally competency course in education graduate programs. So we're setting them up for failure. And most often, authority is going to win, and that's when we see those conflicts coming into our school system, and the person with the pen is always going to win. So I move from a lens of preparing the leaders and the decision makers instead of asking 10 and 12-year-old kids to figure out adult life. So, great question. Second one.
Yeah, second part.
Wait.
Athletics versus academics. Support. Yeah.
Diversity. Why choose?
No, I mean the support that you get from your family.
Why we need to get rid of sports for them to appreciate academia?
Okay.
I say we use that as a vehicle. I use this when I do trainings and conversations, right? We know who Nick Saban is? He's the coach of the University of Alabama, right? Right? How does a white man go in the homes of impoverished communities where most of these parents are black and brown and convince them to trust him with their babies in the most historical racist state there is? How does he do it? How many plates of collard greens and chitlins do you think and cornbread he had to eat? Sports, I'm sorry folks, I know we're going to get upset, but sports is a great example of what diversity is. When you look at football players, guess what doesn't matter when you're talking about the game? And everybody has a different role because it's a team. And at the end of the day, you want one thing. Use that parallel when you're talking about academics. That's exactly what I do to the kids when I'm speaking to football teams. Okay, but secondly, what your grades look like.
Right.
So yeah, thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Hi,
Hi.
I too am a social scientist.
Yay! Wait.
So I have a question. I think maybe you can shed some light. So if you look at this room, it's pretty diverse, right?
Yes.
And so HBCUs have always been welcoming. We've always had professors of different nationalities, ethnic backgrounds, etc. But sometimes, and probably don't throw a dagger at me, some of the people in this room really don't know how to reach the students at HBCUs. So their first encounter with those students may kind of turn the students off. They may have the aptitude for STEM, but because they are not culturally competent, the professors, it creates a problem sometimes for the students feeling comfortable. So if you have some advice for our colleagues who maybe didn't grow up here, who are not really steeped in, say, African American or Hispanic culture or whatever, what they can do to overcome some of those cultural barriers between, from their schooling and dealing with our kids.
Great point, great question, and I'm glad you brought it up. To the African American scholars on these campuses, I hate to tell you this, but you got another responsibility. We can't complain about other folks not understanding our community, and you get an opportunity to teach them, and you walk away from it. And we're looking for someone else to come do the work that we know is to get done. That's that sandbox that I'm talking about. You sit in the faculty meeting with these folks, but because of assistant professor status without tenure, associate professor status, lecturer or full professor, that keeps us from doing the right thing. You're gonna lose something by doing the right thing. We gotta think about where we are. We need your help. We need you walking in front of them and offering to say, can we go to lunch together? And you gotta talk about whether or not some of your students have been feeling some tension based on their racial identity. We can do this on the ground without including administration and going through the formal ways, but you gotta step in front of this storm. Being the messenger is saying, recognizing structural inequality, but willing to step in and do something about it. And I get it from a lot of my African American students and adults, and why do I have to? Why did they have to? Why wouldn't you want to create the narrative to be the first to make the first impression? I think it's a lovely thing, but something might be wrong with me, right? Because you get to control this narrative and have this input. Secondly, to those that are not native, you got to tell the truth about what you don't know. It's okay for you to not know something. Sorry, academia, PhDs does not make you smart. It doesn't. Be okay saying, I can't connect with my students. That's how I got here, because the physics department could not connect with their students. I can. And if you need me to come in and have a conversation with your students, I will. The eye test does matter. It matters when I say doctor and I'm published and I played ball and I walk on my toes. It matters. Those kids are looking for themselves within you. They are. Be honest about what you don't know, folks. If you've been educated through those historical institutions of discrimination like the news media, you are not equipped for some of these conversations. It is not a bad thing. Guess what the bad thing is? If you stay there. You can't stay there. You're going to always learn. I used the corny analogy about a sponge in life, right? Absorbing all the water, which is equivalent to knowledge, just to be able to wring it out on others. Keep learning. Keep wanting to learn. There's over 5,000 cultures. Over 5,000 cultures. I can't wait to learn some more. Don't think that this is the end-all, tell-be-all. Keep that energy high, keep learning, and let those babies teach you something. I'm telling you, music is a great way to connect to them, because they love to say, y'all don't love hip-hop. One of the few industries that's created the most black and brown people, not just men anymore. You need to honor that, whether you like the language or not. The pronoun isn't about you. It's about connecting to them. Secondly, you think I like being the only one in all the rooms all the time where people don't look like me? But I know it's necessary for me to be equipped to go back to do the work. You got to get uncomfortable, folks, to get comfortable. And it's okay to be uncomfortable. Now equip yourself with the tools to be able to face any job that comes your way, and you'll get comfortable. You may be invited to NSF and AAAS to stand in front on the stage and have a conversation. Thank y'all.